presenter. As soon as the fourth speaker is in, we will start. I apologize.
Jigayalum. This was very difficult to do on such short notice, and it's so important. So thank you, Mahalet, and thank you, everybody.
So can we introduce to each other until the panelist comes?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm Ambassador Tafari from London, Ambassador of Ethiopia to the UK. It's a pleasure meeting you, Jeff.
Oh, pleasure is mine, sir.
I've been following your articles and also your trip to Ethiopia. So you are doing very good, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we can introduce each other. You can take the floor. I think everybody knows Jeff. Leonard, where are you from? And
did he hear you?
Greetings, Yesterday. I'm Dr. Desta Mama Desta Megu. I am based in Addis Ababa. I'm a consultant and former managing with the Bob Marley Foundation, managing director. Been living in Addis Ababa for 16 years in the activist artist community. But in relation to this event, I'm also the liaison to the African Union for Diaspora Africa Forum, which is based in Accra, Ghana. Thank you. Thank you, Mahalet.
It's good to have you with us, and I like your cross.
So do I, actually. I was going to comment the same.
Thank you. I'm a Saganalu ambassador. All protocols observed.
Ambassador, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can we talk later? You're hours ahead, but we need to catch up. There is something that I need to discuss with you when we have a private moment. If we can manage to get one, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I can send Mahalet my email address and phone number so that we can keep in touch.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, sir.
Okay, so sorry. While you're sorry to interrupt. Alifu, Prince Alifu, you are with us?
Yes.
Because I don't see you. Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think well, we can start. Yeah, so.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, so our last panelist is here. We are just missing Ato Tamrat Nagera, who is supposed to present the first part. But yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so welcome to everyone. Thank you really for making it in such a short notice. I have been talking to you individually, to the speakers, and you all have been, you all have showed me your support and being on board. So yeah, I really thank you for that. Purpose of our webinar today is, as hinted in the title, it's to bring that Pan-African voice that has been kind of missing or silent when it comes to defending the sovereign states in Africa, and also the rights of the citizens in these member states. So we take as an example the case of Ethiopia today to demonstrate this. So, and we discussed. So at the end of it, we will also prepare, taking into consideration what the panelists have said, we will prepare a joint statement that will be sent to the African Union and to its regional blocs, so that we make sure that our voice is heard by those concerned. Yeah, so it's a start, but we have to do a lot, but it's one step at a time. So without any due further Today we have our keynote speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Tafari. So he will do the opening speech for us. But before that, let me say briefly about Ambassador Tafari. As a career diplomat, he has served at diplomatic missions to the People's Republic of China in Guangzhou, in Brussels, in Zimbabwe, in Geneva, and since I think September 2020, he has been an ambassador of Ethiopia to UK and Ireland as well. He also have served in between his years of different diplomatic career as a Director General in Public Diplomacy and Communication in the headquarters in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, also as a Minister Chief Advisor in capacity building, as an Acting Director General, again in Public Diplomacy and Communications, and as a Counselor, Press Information and Documentation Directorate. And also, last but not least, Ambassador Tafari Melesa holds an MA in Literature and a Bachelor of Arts in Ethiopian Language and Literature from Addis Ababa University. Today, he's sparing his time while he's also attending the Glasgow meeting, and we appreciate for making this time. The floor is yours, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Mahalet. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a very warm welcome to you all. At the outset, allow me to express my deep appreciation and thanks to the Defend Ethiopia Task Force Europe team connecting Africa and the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute for organizing this webinar and for inviting me to be part of this important and timely gathering. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to the distinguished panelists, moderators, and participants for taking time out of their busy schedule to engage from near and far in today's webinar. It's my hope that today's event will serve as a platform to create more awareness about the situation in Ethiopia, the role of the diaspora in supporting the cause, and how to galvanize support from the international community and the diaspora on the humanitarian situation. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation that unfolded in Tigray in November last year has represented a watershed moment in my government's attempts to ensure the rule of law and advance the cause of human rights in the country. The impunity implanted over 3 decades by TPLF dominance, coupled with the demise of TPLF privilege following the transition in 2018, created a volatile national situation in which the vast majority of Ethiopians sought to move forward into a new era of democratization and justice, while a few political elites sought to return to the repression of the old. And finally, on the night of November 4, the TPLF, aided by its supporters, armed itself and committed the most heinous crime by attacking the northern command of the Ethiopian National Defense Force. This wanton act of aggression and treason posed a threat to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Ethiopian state, as well as grave danger to the stability of the entire Horn of Africa region. No government can tolerate its soldiers and innocent civilians being ambushed and killed in their dozens, as happened at the hands of the TPLF. Therefore, it was a duty incumbent upon the government of Ethiopia to take appropriate measures against the illegal army of the TPLF and to restore law and order in the Tigray region. This conflict, which was created by a few individuals who were intent on destabilizing the country, unless they could be in charge to turn the wheels as they pleased, has cost our country dearly, and the government's highest priority right now is ending the suffering in Tigray and around the country. For centuries, many have sought to divide and destabilize Ethiopia and have failed. Today, Ethiopia once again faces the looming threat of destruction by way of a multitude of threats concocted by the TPLF and external force. Over the last year, it has been said to note that much of the international media coverage of the current situation unfolding in Ethiopia is dominated by outlets engaged unwittingly in the spread of misinformation and propaganda, and whose reporting has consistently failed to meet the journalistic standards they champion. Furthermore, campaigns and sanctions are being waged by other governments against Ethiopia in an attempt to dictate terms to the country and undermine the unity, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of the Ethiopian state. These campaigns are not helpful and only hurt the very people these partners aspire to protect. While we welcome cooperation and concerns from our friends, we underline the need to employ a constructive approach, cultivate trust, and create understanding. At this critical time, as we are working to fend off threats against our national sovereignty, Ethiopia needs the support and solidarity of friends and partners, and not uncalled for pressure that would complicate the situation further. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have witnessed in the past few weeks is the TPLF's continued aggression and provocations in neighboring regions, particularly the Afar and Amhara regions. This is happening despite the government's declaration of the unilateral humanitarian ceasefire to ensure better humanitarian access and to strengthen the efforts to rehabilitate and rebuild the region. The TPLF has outrightly rejected the ceasefire, and instead of taking the opportunity to support those in need for humanitarian assistance, they have resorted to declaring war on neighboring regions, thus pushing the people of Tigray into further disarray. This has put the lives of many at risk and has left hundreds of thousands in neighboring regions displaced. The destruction to economic assets within the region has also disrupted the livelihoods of many. Despite the TPLF's continued aggression, which is exasperating the humanitarian situation, the international community has remained silent. As Ethiopia stands at a crossroads in its efforts to build a more pluralistic and prosperous society, I call upon the international community to stand in solidarity with the people and government of Ethiopia in condemning the TPLF atrocities and encroachment into other regions. I also urge you to be cognizant of the misleading reports on Ethiopia currently circulating, and would therefore like to take this opportunity to call upon the media, the distinguished panelists, and others to use their platforms to share balanced and accurate information about the current situation in Ethiopia. The Organization of the African Union, Unity, now the African Union, was formed 58 years ago by African fathers like Emperor Haile Selassie and Kwame Nkrumah, with one common goal, that only through unity and solidarity can Africa safeguard its independence and unlock potentials. Africa is home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world. We are ambitious and optimistic. We have more that unites us than divides us. So it is imperative for us to work together in the true spirit of Pan-Africanism, solidarity and cooperation to create the Africa we want, a peaceful continent, a continent with a bright future ahead. In his inauguration speech a few weeks ago, Prime Minister Abiy underlined the critical need to strengthen our capacity to produce African solutions to the many natural and man-made challenges we face as a continent. We should strive our hardest to carry out our responsibility under the principle of African solutions to African problems, to create a united, peaceful, and prosperous Africa that protects our continental interests in the world stage, the Prime Minister said. The government of Ethiopia therefore welcomes efforts spearheaded by the African Union and will work with them, together with the High Representative for the Horn of Africa, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, towards an Ethiopian-led national dialogue to resolve the current situation. Ladies and gentlemen, Notwithstanding the current challenges we face, I remain confident that the Ethiopia that lies on the horizon is one of hope. The coming years will be a period when we demonstrate to the whole world that the name Ethiopia, truly associated with perseverance as we take the time to heal the nation. To all friends of Ethiopia who have extended a hand of support at a time when our country needed it most, who stood by our side in our moment of weakness, I sincerely thank you on behalf of the people and government of Ethiopia. Now is the time for us to stand in solidarity together with ordinary Ethiopians in condemning any actions that would seek to reverse the hard-fought gains of the current reform process. Let us grasp this opportunity and to chart out a better present to hand over to future generations. Let us stand together and fight for the future of Ethiopia and the future of Africa. God bless Ethiopia. I thank you. Back to you, Mahalet.
Thank you, really. Sorry, thank you, Ambassador, for that wonderful opening speech, indeed reminding us how important it is as an African to stand in solidarity, and also for those, you know, who still loves and support Ethiopia, to fight the false information and the disinformation that's really now pressuring Ethiopia. With that note, we now pass to Jeff Pearce, to whom we all know. So Jeff Pearce will walk us through today to the information warfare which is fabricated by TPLF and amplified by its Western media allies. So please allow me to introduce Jeff briefly. Jeff Pearce is a writer, investigative journalist, and author of the book, which we all know, Prevail, the inspiring story of Ethiopia's victory over Mussolini's invasion from 1935 to 1941. He's also a novelist, an editor. He has worked in television, radio, magazines. He has taught also journalism, but I think we know Jeff Pearce in the past 1 year. He has been writing a number of a series of articles fighting back the false information that has been put out by TPLF. Jeff, I really have the pleasure and the honor to have you here. We cannot say thank you enough for what you're doing to Ethiopia. The floor is yours.
Hi, can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yes. The reason why I asked at the beginning was because I saw a wonderful cartoon recently about Zoom conferences, and they said there was like the modern seance where you all gather around saying, someone wants to join us. Is Elizabeth there? And so that was very funny. So now you have to check every time to make sure you have the audio and everything. I haven't prepared too much in the way of remarks because the trouble is I'm commenting on something that I think everyone here knows. So every time I do one of these things, I try to find a way to find something new to say. We are in trouble. And you're all familiar with what's been going on. From the very first day that this happened, November 4th, they started using the hashtag Tigray genocide. Even before there was a genocide, they were throwing this out. Now, I frankly think that they got this because the hashtag was Amhara genocide months before, and I've been marking the number of actual massacres that have been perpetrated against the Amhara people since last summer of 2020. I've been marking this. So I think they appropriated that for that purpose. So November 4th comes along and we have a hashtag for Tigray genocide before it's even possible. This has been a coordinated campaign, and what's incredibly infuriating is that we're getting pushback from, of all people, Antonio Guterres of the UN and others saying, all the conspiracy theorists. Well, no, it is a conspiracy when you have an organized, coordinated attack. If you have media which repeatedly uses the same experts Tronville, Davison, Alex DeWall, Cameron Hudson, Rashid Abdi, and others. If you keep going back to the same white experts to interpret Africa, and if you folks are familiar with me at all, and if anybody who's watching this is familiar with me, I've been haranguing for ages saying, put African voices on. And of course they don't. We're in the age of Black Lives Matter, and yet somehow it's acceptable to have all these guys talk about Africa, and they're not even there, including one who's been deported from the country twice. That's not enough. What has happened as well is you have a media, Western media, which goes over and is the interpreter of Africa in terms of the news. And what they did, which was deviously clever, give the devil his due, they have fixers arranged there to greet them, to walk them around and lead them by the hand to whatever they want to do. Whatever they want to show. And these idiots will go and do it. And they think they're getting a story because part of the Western rubric of journalism is drama. It's very interesting when you watch BBC World Service and you watch Focus on Africa. Because they have to fill a half hour of African news, you see regular news, you see business news, you see innovations in terms of manufacturing, you see what's going on in terms of people's daily lives in terms of new infrastructure. And you don't get that in the big headline news that you normally get on the evening news of London on ITV or BBC. You don't get that on NBC or CBS. What you get is Africa is chaos. And that's what they look for. So you have these idiots being led around by fixers who are clear TPLF operatives. And we know this for a fact because one of my associates found one spouting TPLF rhetoric openly in the hotel lobby. And this guy was passed along from the woman who interviewed Getachew Reda and got that scoop to the National Geographic, if memory serves. So you have that. So you have a combination of that. And then you have ridiculous efforts in terms of PSYOPs, which can be effective to asinine. Just today, you have a clown called, I think his name is Anders, and he bills himself as George Anders 007, if you can believe it, mind of a 12-year-old. And this guy puts out a tweet saying, there's chaos, something to the effect of, there's chaos at the airport as people are rushing to get on flights and get out of the country. And what does he do? He shows a screenshot of the standard flights, and only 4 of the flights are international. You can't see anything. All you're seeing is a flight schedule. But he's backing this up with just that to make give the impression that people are rushing the airport to flee the country. And it's ridiculous. You could do the same thing. You could take a fleet chart of what's in Tampa and say Floridans are fleeing the state. That's what you've got. You have a professor in Mekelle who claimed, maybe you saw this, who claimed this is the artillery in Desi, and shows artillery pieces firing from some strip with lots of lights. And it only took half an hour to an hour for people to figure out, hey, this is a 2016 shot from Russia, an anniversary of some kind of military event. And it's not even on the same continent. And this gets passed around. And what is the effect? The effect is confusion. The effect is to sap the will. The effect is to spread disinformation. So there's such a muddle that you can't tell the truth anymore. We see this with my cadre. Why is the US Embassy in Eritrea putting out Facebook posts re-arguing the massacre in my cadre? I've been to my cadre. My team interviewed victims there. We have the facts. We know what went on. And yet, months later, they've decided to argue this. We know that despite the collective attempts by the mainstream media to have the definitive word on Axum, the main narrative is nonsense. How do I know this? Because ESAT was kind enough to share with me the rough video of the religious celebration that took place on one of the days this was supposed to happen. It was uploaded to YouTube December 4th, long before there were any allegations of a massacre. And so you see people walking around outside the church where blood was supposed to be flowing, and they're perfectly calm. They're talking about how attendance is down, and nobody has an answer for that. I raise it all the time, and we don't get a response because you can't respond. There is no counter to that. Here's the evidence. Here's the video. It's uploaded December 4th. Try again. Yet it doesn't make an impact because part of the strategy is to ignore anybody who raises a hand and says, excuse me, this is nonsense. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, my digital recorder was stolen at the airport. My sources were outed, and they made allegations against the UN officials and how they were colluding with the TPLF. And what's interesting is how the media handled that. No one called me, even though I'm the person who conducted the interview. No one bothered to confirm any of the facts with me. All they did was go out of their way to smear the two sources and run with that. And what's interesting is the reaction of regular Ethiopian people in the diaspora, because they said, basically their response was, this confirms exactly what we thought, and they were right. In other words, a TPLF gambit of disinformation blew up in their faces. It was a major misstep. And then sources have since provided me with an internal email from the UN, which pretty much confirms that the TPLF are using forced recruitment. Moreover, a source has told me how the TPLF will beat up and detain even UN staff, and the UN will cover it up. This should be headline news in the West. This has ramifications around the world. Why is this not being reported? Because they simply don't want it to. They want to push this narrative. And so I cannot be seen to exist, and other people like me cannot be seen to exist. Jamel Countess works for Getty Images, which is about as legit a media operation as you can ask for. Only three media operations have taken advantage of his photos of my cadre. And he's taken wonderful photos. He's got the backstories of the victims. Three operations have taken advantage of that. Two of them in Germany. Why? Because there's clearly a concerted effort. Now, the thing is, I've said some of this stuff before, so I want to wrap it up by saying what we can do. Because if you're preparing this joint letter that is going to different authorities, may I urge you that the thing is, there has to be reform, broad-based international reform across the continent in terms of how journalism is done. And I was going to make some of these claims in a speech in a couple of weeks or so, but I'll give you some tidbits now. Quite frankly, as some authorities on here know, it is very difficult for Africans to migrate, even to go attend conferences to the West. The EU and North America treat them as criminals even before they show up and make it very difficult, let alone immigrating to other countries. To my mind, quite frankly, if Western media outfits want to send somebody to cover Botswana or cover Ethiopia or cover Ghana, then you should have international arrangement that they have to take one of yours. A Botswana correspondent should be entitled to go cover the United States. A reporter from Ghana should be let in to cover France. Have some quid pro quo. You should have reform over this system of fixers. We have Turkey, I think, is a good example, and I believe this is the arrangement, where you have to go through a course just to be a tourist guide there. There is no good damn reason why there shouldn't be accreditation for fixers so that they have to go through courses on the history of the country, the current affairs. So you have to be an accredited licensed fixer to work for international correspondence. And yes, there are some criticisms of that, which would be immediate in terms of, say, governments trying to twist these people to their ends. That can be an international body that regulates. There should be that. There should be other reforms in terms of journalism, so that when Western correspondents come into a country, they have to abide by certain rules, which is a fundamental requirement on their visa. You are a guest in the country. You cannot go around lying about it, as we've seen in some of the copy by Robbie Corey-Boulet, as we've seen by Declan Walsh. You can't come in and glorify child soldiers. You cannot come into an African country and violate the safety of a safe house for sexual assault victims and splash them all over your evening broadcast. No, that's got to stop. So there has to be fundamental reform in terms of journalism in developing countries. The days where you have white people who come along to interpret the country and they're supposed to be the end all and be all say in terms of how even current events are happening has to be over. And of course, some idiot out there will say, well, you're white. Yeah, the only reason why I have a voice at all in this is because we have an entire infrastructure of media and the outside world who won't listen to Africans. The very reason why I went over to Ethiopia in August was because the two diaspora groups that funded me said, they won't listen to us. You've got to go. That's why I went. I wanted to go, but the thing is, they said, they won't listen to us. So it is a cruel irony that I'm busy pushing for this stuff, when in actual fact, it should be, somebody should be listening to qualified African experts, African voices to do it. And I can go back to writing books, which is what I normally do. I'm not an activist. But the thing is, I have to be an activist because I'm also a human being. And we can't let this system perpetuate where you treat an entire continent like a gulag, don't let people out, send Western reporters in and say, oh my gosh, Africa's in chaos. Oh, these people, oh, their ethnic rivalries. Oh, they're killing each other. Here's some footage of it. Wow. It amounts to conflict porn. We have to have a reform system that kicks out operations like Sahan Research, Crisis Group, the others who are just vampires on these countries. And if I had my way, I'd be kicking out Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International as well, because they are neo-colonialist operations, which are only there so they can bleed donations out of people on the other side of the world and out of the World Bank and out of other operations. While the main funders of, I believe it's Crisis Group, is George Soros, who's funding one of those. What kind of, and these people are not accountable to you. They get to come in, make their spurious claims about how your politics are, how your people get along, and they don't answer to you. That has to change. It has to change urgently. So my contribution to this joint letter to authorities would be, please put in something about these things. And just in closing, the fact of the matter is I'll say this every venue I can get. Ethiopia is bleeding. You have a terrorist organization, oligarchy, practically a cult, which are trying to exterminate the country. Fight like you've never fought before. If you are watching this from within Ethiopia, fight like you've never had before, because they will kill you. That is the agenda. The agenda is slaughter. And I'm sorry, but nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to join in the struggle and defend yourself and defend your family and fight for your country. And I want to get back there as soon as possible, because I would be very glad and proud to be there to help Thank you very much for the time. I probably went over, but I hope it's been useful. I can't stay for the entire event, but if anybody has any questions now to ask, maybe we can do that now, unless you want to move on your schedule.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for the wonderful contribution, and I'm glad that we decided also really to take into account what the panelists say. That will be a very good a very good tip, and we will be happy also to share it once we prepared that statement. Thank you. It's always nice to hear what you have to say. I think we have three speakers, but since you don't have time, you told me to stay for the whole session. Maybe if there is back to Tashala, if there is our host some questions already in the chat to Jeff, we take them now. I think that's better. It's a good opportunity.
Yes, I think Zelalem is having.
Yeah, Jeff, probably you can answer one of the questions here where Felipe asked, what, in your opinion, is the reason for the UN misinformation campaign in opposition to the government of Ethiopia?
In terms of the UN, well, that's difficult to say, because the thing is, you have two things going on at once. The TPLF, from what I can see and what I can tell, has developed like a Russian oligarchy. And just like a Russian oligarchy, they have infiltrated major positions in terms of media, in terms of political influence, in terms of business. So on the one hand, you have allies within the infrastructure. I mean, and some of it is just shameless. See what Tedros is tweeting out. He does not tweet out in terms of, say, what's happening to Amhara, what's happening to other ethnic groups which are being massacred and harmed. He only tweets out about the TPLF, pride. So you have that. And this is where people accuse us of being conspiracy theorists. And we have the evidence right available. There are people who are collecting his tweets just last night to show the pattern. On the other hand, you also have sympathizers who are not, they're not Tigrayan, they're not TPLF, but there's cognitive dissonance going on where they actually buy the story. And it's, of course, it's hard to believe, but as I pointed out, I have the internal email, the UN, saying, staffers should not go, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have it right in front of me, staffers should not attend recruitment events or take video or photographs. Why would the UN have to tell their own staff not to do that? That is horrifying. The fact that the UN knows that there's forced recruitment going on and talks about it in internal documents and then does not put it in their public documents. The problem, I think the problem is they've bought into the narrative. They're working every side by side, and somehow it's a case of, what's the old term in terms of Stockholm syndrome, where they pick up on the propaganda, they pick up the message, and they genuinely believe that there's no difference between ordinary Tigrayans who are actually the hostages of this situation and a mob, a cult, and a terrorist group all combined into one. That's the only way I can sort of answer that question.
Thank you. Zelalem, is there next? Zelalem, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I think that should be it for Jeff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank
But
you,
there are
folks.
so many, a lot of messages appreciating what you're doing. So
I've done nothing.
I just want to let
When
you
I
know.
finally do something useful, then okay. But so far I've accomplished nothing, and I want to try and do something useful for folks. Thank you, though.
But allow me to say this, Jeff. I mean, you definitely have done a lot, but whenever we look at you, I mean, we look at your works, it reminds us how much we have not done so far, and it brings that energy that we, as you said, we have to fight. We're like, we never fight, yeah, we have to fight, and we have to continue like never before. And thank you very much.
Can I just say one thing? When I say those words, yes, it's easy to say those from the comfort. I'm in a Toronto house, far from there, but I do want to figure out it's the logistics, the funding. I do want to get back there. I would not say these words, making them empty, without wanting to be there with you. And I will try like hell to get there as soon as I can. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, yeah, that was really good. Yes, so moving on, our next speaker is Ras Elijah. As you know from our, a lot of webinars have been done and Zoom meetings, but we have been trying really to bring a Pan-African, that, a kind of a webinar that's Pan-African, to bring people who support Ethiopia, who support Africa. So one of the purpose of this meeting is definitely to close that gap. So we have here today Ras Elijah Tafari, who will present to us his thought on Ethiopia, Africa, and the UN strategic solutions addressing the root cause. So allow me again to introduce him briefly. Ras Elijah Tafari is an artist and the founder of the organization Reform the United Nations. Now, he is born in Cairo and currently Egypt and currently based in New Mexico. Ras Elijah Tafari is a fine artist who specialized in creating African and Rastafari arts. His focus on His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie the First and Ethiopia, meaning his arts being focused on that, made his art internationally recognized. In 2020, he wrote and published a book marking the 75th anniversary of the UN, which is called Mankind's Last Hope, the Urgent Need to Reform the United Nations. On the day of the publication, which is 1st November, he also founded this organization called RAN, meaning Reform the United Nations Now. He has spoken on various events at African, in the University of New Mexico, at UN International Day of Peace, and also at the historic royal visit of Prince Ermias Haile Selassie and Prince Saba Kabada. It says, yeah, and Ras Elijah, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahala. Greetings, and thank you, everyone. And thank you, Defend Ethiopia Task Force Europe and the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute for organizing this webinar. And thank you, Mahalet, and Connect Africa for hosting this most important forum. When I speak to you, it is not for or as myself. It is on behalf of RUN, Reform the United Nations Now, a new and passionate organization that is raising a global call for the removal of the UN Security Council veto power and a democratic United Nations. In order to see a functioning and mature United Nations, we need to see accountability on all parts of all nations, and not to allow the US, China, Russia, Great Britain, or France to have the final say. The current policies are from a colonial era, and for Africa, who holds a majority of seats today, it is counterproductive for us to be marginalized. Many of us are Pan-Africans, and we can see how these superpowers threaten to recolonialize Africa, and how a system of permanent ruling class and discrimination is the root cause for both what is holding the UN and Ethiopia from its potential. Let us make it clear why we're here. We believe Ethiopia is being attacked on many fronts, internationally led by maverick entities within the United Nations, influenced by foreign governments and the TPLF. The United Nations falls short of providing the assistance that African nations need, and then groups like the African Union, they have to step up. The African Union, through rising to the challenge to be honest peacemakers, can be globally needed examples and add legitimacy to the purpose and the will of the African Union. Why is the African Union so important in this topic? It is because Ethiopia is not only its headquarters, but in the middle of a sophisticated domestic and foreign attack, both in an armed conflict and in an information war, one that Africa will either collectively suffer from or collectively conquer. We are also here because Ethiopia is the heart of humanity. And like many nations across Africa, we see Ethiopia as a beacon of hope. Following the death of Meles Zenawi, Those who watched the fall of the TPLF after 27 years of documented brutal rule were hopeful. Their hope rested in a new prime minister that was there to repair the damage and can bring Ethiopia into a new era. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made sweeping changes and angered those who benefited from war and division from all sides, resulting in assassination attempts. The TLF have, over their 27 years in power, consolidated the country's weapons, the ammunition, and have stolen over $30 billion from the treasury while building their international relationships. They built on the communist instated ethnic federalist constitution left by the Derg, exploiting ethnic discrimination to benefit Tigrayan business interests and military power. We as RUN have been studying the complicated chess moves that the international community is doing, what the TPLF is doing, and what the Ethiopian government is doing. In the interest of a secure Ethiopia, we want to acknowledge some important facts. This civil war was initiated by the TPLF through having a non-state sanctioned election during international COVID-19 lockdowns. Then the TPLF attacked and murdered Ethiopian troops on the Northern Command base while they slept in Mekele. The TPLF general, Skutsur Ganacho, November 4th, 2020, proudly confessed that they took a preemptive strike. Number 2, global terrorism databases recognize the TPLF as the terrorist organization since the 1970s. Countless genocides have happened under the TPLF rule on the Amhara people, the Afar peoples, the Oromo tribe, protesters, and journalists. The TPLF cannot be negotiated with by a government that doesn't want to take the country backwards or be divided. Ethiopia is in a process of both reshaping its government and military, independent of TPLF influence. The TPLF is not looking for independence. It is attacking its neighbors, forcing locals to fight for them, including children. The elected Ethiopian national government has the right to defend themselves, as well as local tribes, peoples, and militias where the Ethiopian government cannot defend them. When Ethiopia willingly decided to work with the African Union, it was clear that it would be Ethiopian-led in respect to sovereignty. The importance of the AU to show itself to be a cooperative partner with proper leadership that can work with the Ethiopian government. The importance of food assistance, proper reporting, investigation needs a third party in order that it can be monitored and transparent. We have seen from missing UN food trucks and fuel provisions that the TPLF are using the UN to help provide for their army without the interests of the Tigrayan people in mind. All the UN reports and all those involved in their writing also need review after the leaked reports of the UN officials being infiltrated by the TPLF lobbyists and expressing fear of the TPLF, UN, and foreign reprisals. These are things that we believe the African Union can be helpful in. We'd like to thank Jeff Pearce for that. Strategically, we have both an armed conflict and information war to overcome. It will take more than the Ethiopian government to move world opinion because of the damage done by misreporting from BBC, CNN, the New York Times, Facebook, etc. The US, which is widely believed to be indirectly arming the TPLF, has led the misinformation campaign and appeared together with the UK and the EU to have sanctioned the TPLF's attack on Ethiopia. In order to counteract that, the African Union and African leaders need to be able to stand with the Ethiopian government. The danger of succession cannot be understated, nor the importance of amending the Ethiopian constitution to remove the ability of any tribe to succeed from Ethiopia. The policy of ethnic federalism needs to be removed and a new unified national agenda needs to be pursued. In the case of any conflict, the energy and cost of war can weaken national resources and resilience and hinder the solutions to come. The Prime Minister and Ethiopians are well aware the constitutional reforms need to happen and soon. The global awareness of the need to remove this system of discrimination also needs a proactive media campaign that the African Union should be encouraged and willing to actively support and facilitate. The African Union can secure important routes and roads in Ethiopia that are critical for both commerce and for food aid. Positions in which the AU can help and not hinder are critical, for both Ethiopia and the AU, who need to show that they can rise to outsmart a sophisticated attacker that has little to lose and everything to gain. The TPLF have purposely agitated the Ethiopian government and declined ceasefires and continue to attack neighboring provinces and tribes. They want the Ethiopian military to attack, and they're using the UN and other groups to write exaggerated reports accusing the Ethiopian government of genocide. The Ethiopian government are currently involved in airstrikes, and the current operations are to attack key strategic facilities of the TPLF. There is no doubt the TPLF will try to exploit any innocents that are harmed, which is likely even with the most precision aerial strikes. Ethiopia needs an end to the assault by the TPLF and the global media when it comes to protecting the people and the dignity of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is now awakened out of the oppression it has collectively felt by pro-Marxists since 1975. Her vision of a peaceful nation that wants to bring revitalization to the country and her neighbors and reconnect to the Red Sea, which will benefit the whole Horn of Africa. The question is, can and will the AU be able to resist foreign interests that favor dictatorships over democratic governments? Can the Ethiopian government and the AU realize that in this moment of global misperceptions is the opportunity to make it clear that the UN and international NGOs and mainstream media can be used or manipulated, and do make mistakes, that the manner and the systems of international interests are built on a Western structure of approval and concerns. Overt and covert operations are taking place continentally to destabilize mineral-rich areas of Africa. The motive of the TPLF and some foreign governments is to keep Ethiopia from maximizing her potential and maintain poverty and division, which creates insurgencies, enabling war machines to profit off proxy wars. The so-called NGOs like the Sahan Research Group, located in Nairobi, Kenya, having been expelled from Somalia, have been outlets for misinformation and have influenced the UN in the past. And Matt Biden, former chairman of the Somalia-Eritrea Monitoring Group, was also later discharged from his duties by the UN under compromising circumstances. The TPLF promised a dam and purposely did not deliver it, and knows that in a changing economy in Ethiopia would offset their invested interests in control and historical partnerships. The TPLF still poses a significant threat to the dam, being that the Gerd Dam is in the Amhara region close to Tigray. In the last year, we have seen the United Nations used to interfere on behalf of the US and Egypt with mediations and negotiations that the African Union was already holding between those in dispute over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The topping of the position of the US regarding the dam, with the Trump administration and now with Biden's, has remained with Egypt being their primary ally, with little changes in support of Egypt's military government. Ethiopia knows that the UN has been a strength in the past, but it needs reforms. Ethiopia knows the African Union is good, but also needs reforms. Ethiopia knows this country is great, but its constitution needs reforms. The Ethiopian people are in support of removing ethnic division policies, the vast majority being of mixed heritage, and dissolving legal mechanisms in which the Ethiopian groups can claim independence from the nation as a whole. We are aware of some of the challenges to making those changes with certain tribes that want autonomy. For the sake of a unified Ethiopia that can help usher in a more stable and unified Africa, Ethiopians will have to come together and create their own unique form of federalism. The African Union needs African guidance both within and abroad to realize that this is a challenge that will either add legitimacy or seriously harm its reputation. It is also why Ethiopia has been key in helping other African nations with their internal issues as peacemakers. The potential to transmute the situation is present, to show that many foreign interests do not include the interests of the majority of Africans. The US, Russia, France, and the UK and China will have relationships with Africa, but they need to be strictly regulated and restricted. RUN can see the same narrative as the underlying issue with the United Nations. Then there needs to be strict scrutiny of the agendas of the Big Five in contrast of that of the world and the global problems that need global solutions. We know that Africa must lead the way, that they represent 28% of all UN votes, and that we as Africans are being denied a voice and control of our destiny. Can we see that what is happening in Ethiopia is a microcosm of what is happening in Africa and the world? We have to change the narrative, and it starts with the framework of the system. We would like to commend the approach of the Crown Council of Ethiopia under the guidance of His Imperial Highness Prince Jeremiah Sahle Selassie, who has gathered international solidarity through churches and ministries for a unified Ethiopia. His meeting with the Pope of Rome 50 years after Emperor Haile Selassie I made his last state visit proved to be fruitful in building Christian unity for the cause of Ethiopian unity and solidarity. We would also like to commend Mr. Methos Obang, Executive Director of the Solidarity Movement for a New Ethiopia, for years of service in the interest of unifying Ethiopia without political bias. We'd like to thank Connect Africa for calling together this wonderful panel to address such an important task. May the Almighty continue to bless you. May his wisdom and mighty hand guide Ethiopia to conquer all obstacles. Representing RUN, my name is Ras Elijah Tafari. Thank you.
Thank you, Ras Elijah, for your wonderful presentation. Not only you are saying reform the United Nations, but also to reform for Ethiopia to change its constitution and to come up with a unique way of federalism. I wonder how that will be, but we definitely, need to do something with our constitution. But I like to stress your final point, where you said what's happening in Ethiopia is like a micro of what's happening in Africa. That's exactly what we are saying. It's happening. Yes, we are taking the case of Ethiopia, but this is in general what's happening in Africa. So that's why we need a Pan-African voice. We represent, as you say, 28% in the United Nations. So if we are unified, we definitely can bring a change. And thank you very much for that. So taking these voices of Pan-African voices from diaspora, from inside Africa, outside Africa, beyond talking, what we have to do, we need an action. So it's in that manner, today we have here with us Dr. Mama Desta to tell us what should be the role of the African diaspora in defending Ethiopian sovereignty. So allow me to say something about Dr. Desta. Dr. Desta Yeshimabet Megho, that's her full name, but she is also known as to me and to many others, as she is called affectionately as Mama Desta. So please allow me to call her after this as Mama Desta, because I never called her Dr. Desta. Today she will present to us, as I said, the role of African diaspora duty in defending Ethiopia's sovereignty. Mama Desta, she's born in Jamaica, migrated to New York in the 1970s with her family, where she began her journey into the arts. In the late 80s and early 90s, she promoted concerts, curated events in New York and Florida, managing the Grammy-nominated Queen Dr. Nana Rita Marley, wife of the reggae icon Bob Marley, and other Caribbean and African singers. From 2007 to 2011, she's appointed by Nyabingi Rastafari elders as advisor to Smithsonian Institute's Discovering Rastafari exhibition that was actually open for 4 years. From 2000 to 2004, Mama Desta served as the University of Florida Levin College as acting director for the Center for Race and Race Relations and Community Diversity Coordinator. In 2004, she was managing director of the Bob Marley Foundation, which eventually also led to in 2005, the celebration of the 60th birthday of Bob Marley in Ethiopia. And she, at that time, I think ever since, that's when she started to live in Ethiopia. So in the same year, she also founded a non-profit DYMC and association creating consulting firm. Mama Desta is an author of a children's book called I Love Locks, illustrated by Prince Marfesa. She's a weekly contributor to the weekly Capital newspaper back home in Ethiopia. In 2014, she curated an exhibition called Rastafari, the Majesty and the Movement at the Ethiopian National Museum. She consulted and managed international artists from Caribbean, Africa, from the West, including diplomatic missions, African Union, and United Nations agencies. the diverse and proud mother, Mama Desta. Allow me, I mean, usually what's forgotten from the biography of the woman is actually that they are a mother, they are a grandmother, they are a sister, they are a wife. So Mama Desta is actually a mother, a proud mother of 10 and a grandmother of 13. She actually received the new addition grandchild last
14
night.
today.
The 14, today is 14. Okay, I will correct that. And still, she welcomes that with her daughter, and she's still here with us to do this. Mama Desta, she holds BA in Business and Professional Management from Nova Southeastern University, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida. There's always one thing that's yeah, so Mama Desta, actually, without due further, back to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to be reading, so I don't know what you're going to be seeing, but thank you again, Mahalet. I'm always humbled and honored when you call me, whether as Mama to advise or on occasions like this where I'm with such an august panel of individuals committed to one thing, to reflect on the title, Ensuring the Sovereignty of Ethiopia. It's been centuries, millennia, that ones have tried to undermine, challenge, and overtake our country. And so I'm honored to be a part again of this forum. I'd like to start my presentation with a bit of precedent and historical context to help us move along to the solution part, because many times we don't unpack the scenarios that we find ourselves in, and it's understandable because it's emotional, and therefore there's a lot of reaction versus analysis, and there's so much dynamism to consider when we speak of Ethiopia, the mother, the cradle of civilization, indeed. So the Diaspora duty and role in supporting Ethiopia's sovereignty and Diaspora Africa Forum, the clarion call. I began, which today ironically marks the 91st anniversary of the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen I, November 2nd. I start with an excerpt of his speech at the OAU, May 25th, 1963, as the first president of the OAU, now AU, where His Majesty says, quote, "Our Armageddon is past. Africa has been reborn as a free continent, and Africans have been reborn as free men. The blood that was shed and the sufferings that were endured are today Africa's advocates for freedom and unity. Those men who refused to accept the judgment passed upon them by the colonizers, who held unswervingly through the darkest hour to a vision of an Africa emancipated from political, economic, and spiritual domination, will be remembered and revered wherever Africans meet. Many of them never set foot on this continent. Our context today, the African diaspora, both those at home and abroad. Others were born and died here. The nations of Africa, as is true of every continent of the world, from time to time, dispute amongst themselves. These quarrels must be confined to this continent and quarantined from the contamination of non-African interference. I want to reiterate that statement of His Majesty. These quarrels must be confined to this continent and quarantined from the contamination of non-African interference. Procedures must be established for the peaceful settlement of disputes in order that the threat or use of force may no longer endanger the peace of our continent. Military planning for the security of this continent must be undertaken in common with a collective framework. The responsibility for protecting this continent from armed attacks from abroad is the primary concern of Africans themselves. Provision must be made for the extension of speedy and effective assistance when any African state is threatened with military aggression. We cannot rely solely on international morality. Africa's control over her own affairs is dependent on the existence of appropriate military arrangements to assure this continent's protection against such threats while guarding our own independence. Again, this is the excerpt of a speech, May 25th, 1963, that I still think is quite appropriate and relevant here over 5 decades later. The Diaspora Africa Forum, whom I represent to the African Union as a liaison, which basically means my job is to knock on that door and ensure for the last 12 years that those of us from the 6th region in the 6th region are recognized and reintegrated. We're a self-funded, autonomous, nonprofit organization established in 2001 as an African Union initiative under the auspices of AU Chairman Alpha Conare. Was inaugurated by Ghana President, then His Excellency Kufuor in Accra, Ghana, and we have full diplomatic status and other protocols granted by the then Minister of Foreign Affairs and current President Nana Akufo-Addo. Our mission was to support the African Union in the representation and reintegration of the African diaspora towards the development of Africa, with a vision of enhancing and establishing bridges that unite Africans at home and abroad. Through a host of partnership projects with organizations such as Plan International, Pan-Africanist, the African Business Roundtable, appointments on Precedent diaspora initiatives, as well as in Ghana and Nigeria, as well as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Currently, the Secretariat is also there in Ghana, amongst others. DAF has positioned itself as a welcome and valued voice at the table of continental leaders and decision makers, legends, public and private sector service, as well as civil society. We work right across the board. We consider ourselves an influencer, influencing policies and practices towards the way to advance Africa based on the vision of Africa, not an external vision being imported into the continent. We've also participated in Ghana's Year of Return, which has yielded healthy income and profound positive media for Ghana, resulting in increased tourism and returnees. That said, again, my job at my position as liaison to the African Union does agitate for the recognition and reintegration for those of us coming home, utilizing our skills, services, and more importantly, our Pan-African loyalty. My godfather, the Honorable Ambassador Dudley Thompson, who served as consul to Jomo Kenyatta and as ambassador to Nigeria for Jamaica, said upon his last words that he shared with me, Pan-Africanism or perish. Pan-Africanism or perish. And that's where we are today. With the Addis Ababa being the diplomatic capital of Africa, what is happening in Ethiopia is crucial to the world and obviously to the continent. And it's very important that we do our due diligence to echo what previous presenters have said. Challenge the propaganda that is coming out there. It's ridiculous. And if we are reasonable human beings, we can see through all of this and understand how does the first day of a campaign a year ago, not even 24 years old, begin with Stop the Tigray Genocide. Let's think about this, folks. Let us stop being, I understand we're in an age of followers and that's what we want is followers and likes, but let us stop following. Let us stop being blind sheep while we are slaughtered. It is unacceptable in this time. And those of us in the African diaspora and from the African diaspora, when I say from, living in the diaspora, we have a higher duty. We have a serious duty to be at this table and to use whatever political power, soft or otherwise, we do in the diaspora with leaders, with those who are the decision makers in relationship to the pressure that is being applied to Ethiopia. And certainly while we can go down a list, a plethora of challenges that we're facing in Ethiopia, certainly one of the number one things is indeed the diaspora itself. We are capable and have been spreading so many rumors and sending false information ourselves by simply sharing. We don't even read, we don't analyze. We just share something, whether we agree with it, we don't agree with it. And we ourselves are guilty of fostering or festering this negative information that we're pleading today to say, let us stop. Let us stop. Black communities historically have always come to the, I won't say the aid, but the cheering on of Ethiopia. From the time of the Battle of Adwa, when we defeated the Italians in 1896, it was a watershed moment in the emerging Pan-African community. Within a few decades, maybe 4 decades after that, we had leaders such as Nnamdi Azikiwe and Kwame Nkrumah, who were studying at HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities in the United States, being impacted with Pan-African ideology that allowed them to go home and unlock those colonial forces that had their claws in their respective countries. So the diaspora has been playing a role. We go forward to Ethiopia during the Italian invasion and the establishment of the Ethiopian World Federation, sanctioned by Emperor Haile Selassie and established by Dr. Malaku Bayen, who was able to mobilize funds and resources, and even had the legendary American Tuskegee Institute trained pilot, John C. Robinson, who went to Ethiopia and trained the Ethiopian Air Force. We've got educators like Mignon Ford. My husband went to that school. It's right up the road from where I live in Kasanches. Still exists today, right? Professor Ford, that we all know affectionately, Professor Abbey Ford, his father was Marcus Garvey's music director and one of the writers of the Ethiopian anthem, which is sung today and is resounding throughout the world today as Rastafari celebrate the Coronation Day. To this issue, we have to look at Ethiopia as a strong force that continues to influence and impact the Black world spiritually, economically, culturally, socially, and politically, that should not be given up on, and we cannot sit idly by. I often liken TPLF to an abusive husband who for decades has been beating his wife with brute force and his children, beating them and abusing them horribly. And there are those nice days when he brings home a lovely dinner. And there are those nice days when we thought, okay, no more, this is going to stop. Hence, 27 years. No, the position now that the TPLF is taking is, if I cannot have this wife and these children, no one will. So he shows up at the doorstep while his wife is trying to gather herself and her children together to start anew, which is represented by over 100 million Ethiopians that voted and said, we want a new beginning. We're not saying we know exactly what is going to happen, but we want to give the opportunity and the trust to our young leader, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. We want to give him the reins and get a fresh new start to see what can happen. TPLF has come in and said, you belong to me. And if I cannot have you, no one will. Hence, the massacre and the bloodletting begins. As our brother said before, our journalist brother, we have to fight like we've never fought before. No compromise, no negotiation. It is off the table. Whatever attempts were made previously were thwarted. So any word coming in from any external force, why can't we sit down? Can't we work it out? We are the world notion, let's hold hands. That is off the table. Ethiopia has a right and a responsibility to the 100 million people that voted for this newly elected government to protect, preserve, and honor the integrity of that oath, which is to advance Ethiopia unconditionally and unapologetically from enemies within and without. Now, this is not an easy thing for the African diaspora to unpack, because unlike the days of past, when our enemies were clearly delineated, we knew who they were from the Berlin Conference when they carved up the continent. We knew who they were when they came in to attack Ethiopia, Italians' flags they carried. Now, the enemy is nebulous and fighting from all levels in all ways and utilizing our very own people and then hiding it under tribalism. This is not tribalism, friends. This is one thing that must be emphasized. That is part of the propaganda. There are good people and bad people in every walk of life, and we can all attest to that, even within our own families, even within our own blood, our own DNA. This is not about this. This is about an organization that was given 27 years, given an opportunity to make a change and did not. No, the African diaspora has made every effort over the decades to engage, but no, it's been frustrating for me, frankly, to find out, what do we do? Where do we go next? What is our role? What is our responsibility? Well, the first one, again, begins with informing and verifying. There is a thing, we say trust but verify. Okay, this email or message came from someone close to me, and this person would never tell me anything that's wrong. Verify the information. So wherever you're sitting in your seat, you're able to make sure that you are sharing what is good and not perpetuating the propaganda that is never ending. It just spins and spins and spins to the point that we're even tuning out those who just decide to shut it down. We're tuning out the actual information that is coming out of the continent. My sister Maureen Achieng, she was a very close sister, and it's very disappointing to me what the United Nations has done to her. I've known this sister and worked with her with IOM for several years. And to me, if this is not proof positive as to the blocks that is going on in our country, I don't know what more is. It's right there. Where the African diaspora is concerned, we do have the ability to lobby and agitate to the African Union. We also have the ability to understand that the African Union has something called Agenda 2063. There is a roadmap in place, and we cannot get distracted. We understand that this is a very difficult time, but we cannot give up whatever it is that we're trying to do to build Ethiopia, because when all the dust has settled, we cannot be behind the 8 ball. We cannot be delayed in all of our advances towards development, towards reconstruction, towards reconciliation. Because what this has done and was designed to do was to break families apart. This is the most divisive action strategically set out with great allies in Europe and the United States to divide, degenerate, and denigrate everything that we know of Ethiopia. A continent who is mentioned in ancient scriptures coming right up now, looked to as a beacon of light to bring embarrassment, shame, and great destruction on us. The diaspora, who has always flown that red, gold, and green flag, has always championed Ethiopia, wherever you go, wherever we may live. I don't know if we have any panelists here who live in Ghana, who live in Kenya, South Africa. We'll see it on the trotros, on the buses, that Lion of Judah flag. Ethiopia, our job will be to help sustain the reputation and the potential of Ethiopia. And the potential will unfold when this dam is in full swing. This is not something new, and this was not a TPLF initiative. From the time of His Majesty and even his predecessor, Emperor Menelik II, this was something on the drawing table. We have always had the Nile. It did not happen 27 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. We have always had the Nile. And so we have to look to the future. We need to engage with local and federal governments in the C6 region where we have the ability to vote. And as I said before, use our soft power to ensure that information is getting out there and that Ethiopians are protected and that the political will shifts back over. And guess what? It's going to shift. As we know, the UN always gets it wrong. They got it wrong in Haiti. They got it wrong in Rwanda. And I can go on and on and on and on. So it is time. Even the League of Nations got it wrong in 1930 when His Majesty had to go and plead and only Mexico stood with Ethiopia. So they have a history of getting it wrong. We as the Africans that are in the diaspora, and I live in Ethiopia now, so I do not consider myself of that category anymore, but I have that experience. My ancestors were taken away through the door of no return in Ghana. We were taken away, dragged on a slave trip in the bowels, and it was Ethiopia that gave us the strength and the beacon of hope to return home. We will do everything to ensure that that light is not extinguished. It is our duty and our responsibility. And all 55 member states of the African Union who have ratified Agenda 2063, we must continue to agitate with them as well to do their part and be guided by what Ethiopia wants and what Ethiopia sees as the best interest of our country. Now that's going to shift. And we have to be willing to understand that just like any military strategy, with that shift, we're going to have to stay loyal. And no, we may not agree with everything. And yes, it gets very murky and it gets very sad. And there are moments where we don't know what's going on, like the current attack in Desi, when we're scratching our heads and saying, how, why? The point is, we cannot abandon the ship. If we give up, if we give in, if we don't continue to raise our voices, the outcome will be devastating. And if we think it's bad now, please, on behalf of the African diaspora, use your voice in a positive way. And most of all, do what you do best. So many times we're working out of our wheelhouse. Concentrate on what you do best in order to effectuate change, whether it's the arts, whether it is politics, whether it's economics, whether it is investing in youth initiatives and women initiatives that are adding value in private sector to the Ethiopian livelihoods that are being decimated as we speak. Do not stop. Engage with Ethiopia. Stay engaged. Do not sit on the sidelines and watch. But I can tell you this, by the power of the Almighty, just as we have brought down Goliath, and just as we have brought down the Jericho walls, the TPLF, it shall come down, and all of their supporters will be brought to shame. And this is a fact. And anything that I can do to further support this initiative, please do know that I am here to serve. I went home to serve. This is what I do. And I give thanks again, Sister Mahalet. This is a bold, bold calling. I thank you, Ambassador, Your Excellency, for your work and the other panelists. And I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mama Desta, for that really wonderful speech presentation, reminding us the history and precedents of Ethiopia's engagement with Africans at home and also in the diaspora. As AU calls it, the sixth region, actually, and also reminding us of the unprecedented level of challenges and turmoil that need to be met with both internal and external reflection and action. You know that we have talked about this. I have been asking, as you said, as you laid out the connection between Ethiopia and Africans in the diaspora goes back way before, and they have done a lot when we were invaded by Italy out of their will to come and fight, to bring medicines, many things. And the first, one of the first repatriates being Professor Abbey Ford and parents, actually. By the way, we have here with us Ambassador David Commission. I would like to acknowledge that. So Ambassador David Commission, please say hi to the host. He's an ambassador of Barbados to CARICOM. CARICOM is the equivalent of the African Union for Caribbean community. And we would like to have you here, and later on, maybe after our speakers, to reflect on this. I always ask, what happened now? We were that connected, but what went wrong when all these atrocities are going on in Ethiopia that no Africans in the diaspora are not saying, why they are not putting their voice in the GER? During the GER, it was slightly better, but now it's like silent. So yeah, it helps to bring that, to remind us it was like that. We still need to build it and work on it. And this definitely, it could be the first, but not the last such webinars. And we will continue and engage and try to close that gap as we go forward. Thank you again, Mama Desta. It's always good to have you and to hear the stories and how you connect Africa and with Caribbean, with Africans in the diaspora. I really like that. Continue what you're doing, and again, I would like to say congratulations on the number 14 grandchild, which I forgot to say before. Thank you. So. Our last speaker will be Salifu, Yahya Salifu. So having all this, we need to, at the end, of course, to strategize how we mobilize voices from Africa, inside Africa and outside Africa. So that's why we have here today Yahya Salifu, also known as Prince Salifu. By the way, I'm sorry, the way we start was late and I was like, my mind was all over. I really have to thank the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, really, for being on board. You really have been following the stories in Ethiopia. I really, it kind of opened my eyes after I discussed with your institution, because I never knew, like, African platforms and organizations have that understanding what is going on, because definitely, obviously, the media is fostering something else. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Prince Salifu. He's a graduate from University of Bua in Cameroon with a bachelor degree in environmental science. And also in the university, he held various positions in the department and university. Mr. Salifu is also a certified health, safety, and environment expert and a certified school fire marshal. His love for Pan-Africanism ideas dates to his secondary school days, where he always visited and listened to pioneer Pan-Africans in his home and country, and wherever he stays, he always interacts with fellow Africans. That's how he stayed a Pan-African. And also, he is presently the Piolo Lumumba Foundation country director in UAE, in United Arab Emirates, and also executive director, one of our organizers here, Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute. In 2015, he founded an association called Center for the Advancement in Mbembe, Cameroon, which works to conserve the environment, source funds for developmental issues in rural areas, improve health and education of the unprivileged. Prince Salifu's love for the development of young people led him to found a business, Africa Asia Education Consulting Limited, which provides, among other services, connecting African students with universities abroad with other high quality education at a cheap and affordable prices. He spent most of the time, he's based in two places, in Cameroon and Dubai, and I know that he's joining us from Dubai now. Prince Salifu, back to you. Thank you very much, for organizing these events with us. I leave the floor for you.
Thank you very much, Mahred and fellow speakers and participants. You may be getting some noise because my laptop just developed some problem this evening. So please just bear with me if you hear the noise. Yes. I'm talking on this topic, how to mobilize Africans at home and in the diaspora in support for Ethiopia. We know when it comes to Pan-Africanism or African unity, what Ethiopia has done to Africa. Presently, Ethiopia is experiencing a lot of attack, which necessitate that Africans have to come together to try to defend Ethiopia. An attack on Ethiopia is an attack on Africa because Ethiopia is the only country that wasn't colonized. So there is this zeal by foreigners to colonize Ethiopia so as to say that the whole of Africa was colonized. So we know that, and I think if maybe in the past we failed, but this time around we are not going to let that happen. We are going to try our best to defend Ethiopia in the way we can do it. Kwame Nkrumah said, "It is clear that we must find an African solution to our problems, and that this can only be found in African unity. Divided we are weak, united, Africa could become one of the greatest forces for good in the world." That was Kwame Nkrumah calling for our unity. Then in 1997 in Accra, Ghana, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere said, "If numbers were horses, Africa will be riding high. Africa will be the strongest continent in the world, for it occupies more UN General Assembly seats than any other continent. Yet the reality is that ours is the poorest and weakest continent in the world. In addition, our weakness is pathetic. Unity will not end our weaknesses, but until we unite, we cannot even begin to end the weakness. So this is my plea to the new generation of African leaders and African people. Work with firm conviction that without unity, there is no future for Africa." Yes, these are some of the famous African pioneers who call us to unite, to look for solutions to our problems. This is one of the things that we in Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute appreciate very much of President Abiy, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the Ethiopian people, because they decided that the problem in the Horn of Africa should be solved in an African way, should be solved by Africans, not letting foreigners come in to try to solve the problem. So what do we learn from this? He's a Pan-Africanist. He is trying to promote African and African solutions. And then what does he need? Any African at home and abroad who calls himself or who believes in Pan-Africanism has to support what the Prime Minister and the people of Ethiopia are doing, because they are upholding what our great Africans have called us to do. That is to unite, try to solve our problems by ourselves. You will have many people in the continent and out of the continent, or many Africans in the continent and out of the continent, complain about lack of resources, for example. But then if I want to quote from Comrade Dr. Umar Johnson, who says, Black people in US spend $2 billion a year on Air Jordans, $4 billion a year on liquor, $20 billion a year in hair care and beauty products. So with this amount of money that just the African diaspora in USA could spend in a year, then we shouldn't complain about resources. That we do not have the resources to mobilize our people, or we do not have the resources to try to take care of our problems. So these strategies are strategies that we are calling on all communities to try to apply in a way to support Ethiopia, Ethiopian government, and the Ethiopian people. The situation that Ethiopia is facing now requires everybody, all of us, to try to defend it, to try to put out the real story that is happening, not the fake one that especially the Western media is trying to twist, because that is what we know they are very good at doing. So we need to look at strong leadership in African communities. Look at strong leadership, because if we engage a strong leadership that will support a drive to try to get the right information, to understand what the Ethiopian government and the people are doing at the moment, and other African countries, because what is happening in Ethiopia is, if it succeeds, is going to go to other African countries. So if you get a strong community leadership that can help to spread the correct information about what is actually happening in Ethiopia, is going to help. Then secondly, like the journalists say that the Tigrayan elite or political elite, because of their past presence in the government, they have infiltrated all the structures in Ethiopia. So to get the right information, we have to try to establish formal structures. We develop a formal structure that can effectively lead community change efforts. This structure serves 6 essential functions: providing overall strategic direction, facilitating dialogue between partners, managing data collection, analysis, handling communication, coordinating community outreach, and mobilizing funding. Because to pass the message of what is actually happening, to get Africans both at home and abroad to get involved, we have to try to get this information to set up a formal structure that can get this information to the people. We have to engage diverse organizations, community leaders, and Africans that are interested, because if you engage stakeholders who are most likely to support Pan-Africanism, there we understand that there is need to support what the Ethiopian government and Ethiopian people are doing to fend off intruders or foreigners that are trying to destabilize the country. In this, we have to involve the religious leaders, businesses, policymakers, media personalities, and people who have significant influence in the community. We talk to them, get them to understand what is happening. Then ensure authentic participation and shared decision making, because it's not only to bombard them with propaganda. No, it's about getting those who are interested to look at the situation and discuss on how to move about getting this support from the community to the Ethiopian government and people. Ensure authentic and productive rules for young people, because now if we have something, it is easy to pass that information around the world through Twitter, Facebook, and what have you. And we know that young people are the people who are so good at doing this. So we need to get them engaged and involve them during planning, development, implementation, and evaluation, so that they can understand what the whole story is, not getting it from people who are twisting the facts. And then we have to create a strategic plan. This strategic plan that lays out the partnership goals. Anybody you are getting involved to understand the goals and objectives of what we are trying to do. Identify the social and individual changes that will lead to support of the Ethiopian government and the Ethiopian people. Social changes include increased public will, greater community leadership capacity, increased and high quality community participation, and individual changes include shifts in the knowledge, skills, and behavior among the youth and the adults. Because before people can go out to try to support the government and the Ethiopian people, they have to understand the real thing that is happening, the truth. Then implement mutually reinforcing strategies. Decide on the activities that participants have to do. Because, for example, Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute and Defend Ethiopia Task Force Europe, we decide to engage media institutions or media organizations in Africa and try to go on air and talk about what is happening in Ethiopia, so as to counter the narrative put out by the CNN, BBC, and other hostile media, that are hostile to Africa and particularly Ethiopian government at the moment. Create a fundraising strategy, because to get this message out, this requires some expenses. So we should be ready to raise funds to push and get people involved in what the Ethiopian government and the people are trying to do. Establish effective channels for internal communication. Ensure a constant flow of information by adopting formal communication strategies that allow for frequent, deliberate, and productive exchanges between partners. If you are getting people to see what the Ethiopian government and people are doing, they need to have constant information of what is happening. Like this evening, I got from the news that President Biden decided to cancel the preferential treatment that the US has been giving to Ethiopia in trade. But we all know that these things are just names. Actually, they're exploiting the people, but then they put it out as if they are helping Africans to do trade. For example, like the AGOA, which they were the one benefiting. Most African countries were benefiting nothing, because anything you wanted to export, you still had a lot of complication, this rule here and there. And then the most effective is to educate the community. educate and inspire the community by holding fora like what we're having now, engaging local media, designing public service announcements, creating billboard campaign, drafting letters to the editor, launching web-based and social media campaigns, or holding roundtables and conferences. The goal of the public education campaigns is to generate awareness, motivate action, encourage funding, and keep the community focused on the issue at hand. Then the next strategy we can use to mobilize the people is to conduct process and outcome evaluations, because at certain times we have to look at what we are doing. What is it? Are we getting the result? Are people getting involved? Are people talking about what we want them to talk about? Because this fight is not just by the guns. This fight is also about information. If people do not know the truth about what the government is doing, what the Ethiopian people are doing, what they intend to do, especially with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the benefit that is going to benefit the continent, then people may think it is just some kind of Ethiopian thing, but this is an African thing. So we all have to be on board. So we have to look at what we are doing if it's succeeding. Yes. So like I mentioned earlier, Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute support the Ethiopian government and people by empowering Africans at home and in the diaspora and groups to take action to prevent the balkanization of Ethiopia. This includes mobilizing necessary resources, disseminating information, generating support, and fostering cooperation across public and private sectors of the community. I think if we use these strategies, then we are going to get a lot of Africans, Pan-Africanists, see what the Ethiopian government is trying to do, and to know that the fight is not an Ethiopian fight, but it's an African fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prince Alifu, for that, very for presentation and, highlighting this is something that when we leave this webinar today, that we have to take to our community, our platform, wherever we belong, and then try to use those methods that you listed to bring like as a strategy to bring support in defense of Ethiopia's sovereignty, and also in defense of this is actually Africa's sovereignty in the big picture. And we thank you for the particular things that you said, the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, how you are going to support the people of Ethiopia, the government of Ethiopia. We really appreciate that, and we really hope that you also take this. I know that Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute is a big platform, a big Pan-African organization to your people, and share. And also we engage again, we pull another webinar, and this is one of the methods of creating awareness. Yes, I do believe creating awareness is really important, because I don't believe much of us as an African have the right information what's happening in Ethiopia. Most of the African media platforms are just copy pasting the Western media. They're not even willing, not even making effort to take sources from home, whether it could be from TPLF side, also from Ethiopian government. They just copy paste what has been said by CNN, BBC, and we really have to knock a door for them to bring this report to their audience. So that's really sad. And as Jeff Pearce said, we have to also change our way of working the African medias. And whenever something is reported in the world or on those so-called international media, I don't think they're international media because they represented a certain part of the world, that they have to take sources from that country. with that, this is our final speaker, but we will have time, I think, to entertain some of the questions or feedbacks or comments that has been on the chat. But while somebody, I mean, I didn't do that, I'm really sorry, while somebody is pulling specific questions for specific person, I also would like to reflect, this is really a historical time, that they cannot be really any perfect than this November 2nd, we are on the eve of commemorating the massacres that has been done against the Ethiopian National Defense Force on 4th of November, or on the night of the 3rd of November. So yeah, we all go out and we have to remind a genocide is, there are different massacres have been happening. Even last night, 160 of them have been massacred, young people in Desse. So it's not a Tigray genocide as we see in the social media. It's a massacre, a genocide that's happening against Ethiopian people. So we have to be able to remind the world that message. So back to you, Tashala or Dagmawi, is there any specific question to our panelists that you can
maybe I think Zelalem is following up, so I may invite Zelalem.
Yes, sure. One question for Salia from Miki. What can we Pan-Africanists in the Caribbean, such as Bahamas, do to make a real difference? We lobby our government, but it seems like the smaller countries don't be heard. That's the question.
Ras Elijah, I think that's for you.
I think that we're in a real serious situation right now. The recent news and the threats to Addis Ababa from the TPLF and the movements that are happening now means that everybody in Ethiopia potentially is under threat. That this is something that's going to need immediate action, and that those in the Bahamas need to link up with those in CARICOM, who I think are, you know, available or listening. But there has to be an awareness that we're in a situation in which third-party information, as far as making sure that reports are accurate, making sure that both sides do have sources, making sure that, I mean, this is something that's a huge work. And the nature of it is one where this collective database that can either go to the the African Union or to the Kwame Nkrumah Institute, but a way of making it so that there is accurate information on time, which is being done by a true organization. You know, the very nature of really being able to see that what's coming is it looks like war. And the danger of this is one where that time isn't on our side. That this reminds me a little bit of what we just saw in Afghanistan. And there's a certain level of being very aware that this desire to move quickly can be a strategy of the TPLF. The desire of putting out misinformation, of making people think they're coming for you. But all of this is terrorism. And it makes people react in an emotional way. How do we do what we can do as fast as possible for Ethiopia? This is something which that I appreciated the Prince speaking on from Cameroon, Prince Alifu, that this is, we have to do everything absolutely possible. We have to think outside of the boxes. We have to look for like minds, and then we have to pull our resources. And Dr. Desta spoke the same way. You know, if you have, if you're a master of something, if you're good at something, use that resource. If you know other people, same way. But this is something which, you know, my concern is that it's going to be up to the Ethiopian people and the people of Africa close by to mobilize quickly. Dr. Desta also spoke it from His Majesty's words, that our ability to mobilize quickly is most important. Right now, it's up to everyone. As far as what I've heard is that the Ethiopian government has told people in Addis Ababa that it's time to prepare to defend your neighborhoods. you know, that right now is a state of emergency has been issued. So the threat of what is going on presently at this moment is a danger and a threat to all Ethiopians. We need to look at it as a state of emergency. And what do we do when it's a state of emergency? And I appreciated Jeff Pearce's attention of saying, I need to get back to Ethiopia. You know, whatever we can do, do.
Perhaps Prince Alifu, you can add to this as well, because I see that you want to answer this question as well.
Yes, the people, our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean or Bahamas should not think that any effort they do is little. There are people listening. So what they need to do is continue to mobilize themselves and hit on their government. They may seem not to be listening, but somewhere somebody is listening and somebody knows that their problem in Ethiopia is their problem. It is our problem. So we have to keep putting the pressure. Little by little, they will listen. Because we have to understand that some of these people in our government systems are also held hostage. They want us to come out, and then they will come out knowing that they have people behind them. But if they do not know that they have people behind them, they can do things that might endanger them or might endanger their positions. So we have to show them that we are behind them, and then they'll come forward. So keep pushing, keep protesting, keep doing whatever you can do to create awareness about what is happening. Somebody somewhere will listen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Another question, this time for Mama Desta from Kabu. Says, thank you for a very insightful presentation, my sister. Continuing on your solutions-oriented perspective and your challenge to us, to what extent do you think a Pan-African media forum with a similar mandate to DAF and supported by the AU can address the vexing issues related to narratives and image of Africa, Ethiopia specifically, raised in this webinar?
You know, I'm going to be very frank. Everybody knows me for that. I speak my mind. I and call it what it may, because it's based on truth and it's based on morality. As a jurist, I am careful of what I say, however, because I never want to inflame or incite. But even our media in the diaspora has to take responsibility. I have listened to so many shows from friends and colleagues who are journalists who are getting the story wrong. Just now, people are beginning kind of, sort of, to come around. Before, Mahalet referred to internal and external. The internal part is for us to, investigate ourselves, ask ourselves, what is it that our role is as journalists? And I'm going to step away and sort of speak to Kabu as a journalist. What is our role? Never to take sides, but always to speak what is happening on the ground and not regurgitate what is happening in BBC, CNN. It's when we see these stories in Al Jazeera and so forth that we respond to them. But we're not responding most of all to the Twitter feeds. And Twitter is the main thing that the PM, the government of Ethiopia, and other activists are using as the platform for communication. You know, Gil Scott-Heron said the revolution will not be televised. I say it will be tweeted, okay? Look to other sources and get the truth and stop perpetuating this by either silence or trying to mimic or regurgitate these stories that are coming out there. I've done several interviews, as has my husband, Prince Meritafessa, a painter, an artist, one of the few advocates who is not afraid. He just did a major exhibition at the University of Florida called the Weapon Series, depicting Ethiopian soldiers and young people and addressing the issue of child soldiers, all of that, speaking about that. Where's the media? Where's the media? But you see, we're running after sexy stories. And the sexy stories are what the TPLF is pushing and packaging. The other thing to keep in mind is that Ethiopia, our culture, is not one to brag and boast. So this whole idea of having these major propaganda where we're saying we're this, especially Amhara. My husband is from Minsk, okay? And a true Amhara man doesn't go out there and say, I'm being victimized and I'm being, no. So this is a very new space for the Amhara, for the Ethiopian people who are proud to go out and say, hashtag save me, hashtag. This is really out of sorts. And I want people to understand that within journalism, we have to cover stories from a cultural standpoint as well. Give it context. Look at things from all around so that when we present the stories, we're presenting the truth. This is not like the United States or anywhere else, new societies, 100, 200 years old, that you can basically say this one sentence and it fits. Ethiopia is too dynamic. It's too much going on to feel that one soundbite is going to address this issue. And so this is hard work for journalists. This is not the easy gig where you got a stringer and you pick up a line and you run with it and boom, that's it. This particular offensive is going to take a lot of work, a lot of hard work and unpacking, and a lot of psychological analysis on top of that. So this is not easy, and we don't have all the answers here, but I do believe that we're able to scratch the surface and through a concerted letter or statement, be able to say something that's fresh and new, that asserts and reassures Ethiopia that you're not alone. Because just that psychology, again, I mean, I live in Ethiopia. I'll be home in a few days. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going right home. Everybody's worried you're going to, I'm going home. I'm not going to war, I'm going home where I can contribute and hopefully be able to send stories out. But journalists have to start unpacking this also culturally and not just politically, because the Ethiopian society, we're a part of our culture. You cannot pull that apart from who we are politically. It's part of our culture. It's part of who we are, our identity. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you. Just one more question, conscious of time. Any one of the panelists can answer this one. It says, since Ethiopia is the headquarters of the African Union, shouldn't the African Union be much more concerned and actively engaged in bringing positive resolution to the situation in Ethiopia? Is the AU doing enough? And if it is not, why is it not doing more? Any one of you can answer this one.
You know, very briefly, as you said, in consideration of time, the African Union could be doing more. However, there's a bit of a dilemma. When this started, November 4th, a year ago, the position of the government was, we got this, we're gonna handle this. And basically, we did not necessarily welcome that intervention. Things have changed, and also Ethiopia has to set the tone for what it wants, for the role of engagement. And so I think the AU still has a role to play, but it has to be concerted and based on the best interest of Ethiopia. So that's my brief response.
To add on what Mama Desta said, you know, the African Union, according to the African Peace and Security Architect that has been out from, I think, the beginning of the reformation to the African Union, when a country is in conflict, then priority is given actually for the regional blocs to step in rather than as a whole, the African Union itself. So given that Ethiopia is in the eastern part, it used to be IGAD who was playing the major role. And in IGAD, Ethiopia was so active and driving that, you know, sitting behind the wheel, steering the wheel. But now we are not in the same position for various reasons. And also countries come together, member states, and they will be asked actually who can who can step in to make that peace and security arrangement in such countries. Who have there also comes an issue of funding. Who is going to fund it? It's not just to send a military to the country. So there are various things that are going on. But now, if we see Eastern Africa, particularly Eritrea, I mean, most of the countries do not have relation with Eritrea, although Ethiopia has a peace with Eritrea. Sudan is what you can see. It's like I'm talking now about the Greater Horn region. Kenya has a different interest, although we are peaceful, but we all know what is going on. Djibouti, I mean, everybody is in Djibouti, so we all know what kind of an arm twist diplomacy is going on. So all those things has to be taken into consideration. So it's not easy for the African Union just to step in. But in principle, of course, Ethiopia being the capital of the African Union and, you know, running and supporting that Pan-Africanism value, Ethiopia do accept the proposal by the African Union and have welcomed the initiative of the appointment of the former Nigerian President Obasanjo. But of course, as the Deputy Prime Minister said in the last UN meeting, it should be the African solution to African problems should be applied in a way that there is no other intervention. I mean, that knowledge should be, or that wisdom should be applied with no interference. That is where Ethiopia has a problem, and not so much is going, as you can see. So we can say a lot about that, but Ethiopia as a principle will not, did not before, and will not denounce what is proposed by the African Union. The main thing is it should be, African Union should be allowed to do that independently without any intervention. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may add something, I think Ethiopian government by itself cannot really put much pressure on the African Union, but Ethiopian people and other Africans should put more pressure on the African Union to do more, because truly African Union, although engaged, but it is kind of passive. It is not really that forceful when the other, for example, during the negotiation, when the other parties decided not to follow the African Union directives, but to go to US for solution. So there should be some kind of the stick and carrot, because if we want to do something, we cannot stay on the same thing over and over. If these guys do not want to follow the instructions, what are the consequences of their behavior for their actions? So African Union, so what I'm trying to say here is that the Ethiopian people, the African people, both at home and in the diaspora, have to put pressure on the African Union to do more. Let's hope that General Obasanjo, we do well, because I think that he's a little old, not like when he used to be very strong. Maybe somebody younger would have been appointed, maybe to assist him, so that the efforts will be faster, because people like to see things taking place very fast. We are now in a period where the things of the 80s or 70s are too slow. So we have to put pressure on the African Union to do better. That is it. Thank you.
I think it's exactly 2 hours since we started, unless there's any burning questions that needs to be answered. We have to let, I mean, I know that some of the participants have come from another Zoom meeting, so this has been a long day for them. Zelalem, do we have any like burning questions that needs to be addressed? Otherwise, I think we have to go to the closing of this session.
I think most of the questions.
Yeah,
most of the questions were answered. So we have about 20 comments and some questions, but to Jeff, to the ambassador as well. But I think we're good to end the webinar.
Okay. I would like to give the panelists maybe one final word round, and then I will do the closing. Mama Desta, shall we start from you?
Give thanks. You know, the first thing is, let us not underestimate our power. And we may not be very wealthy independently, collectively, but we do have power. If we look at what is going on, the perceptions that have been weaved about what's happening in Ethiopia, simply social media, simply social media. Let us take this time to ask ourselves, what can we do? And understand that we all have a responsibility and a role to play. And particularly on behalf of the African diaspora. And I'll even speak to the Ethiopian diaspora, who is many times a part of fanning the flames. I go to DC, I'm there, I see it. It's time for us to come together. When two elephants fight, the ground suffers. This is going to take a turn though. So, you know, let's hold on and let's stay strong. Let us keep in one faith. Let us pray to the Almighty for our protection. And I give thanks for this opportunity again.
Thank you, Mama Desta. Prince Alifu, back to you.
Yeah, just to support what Mama Desta said, we have to keep pushing. We cannot relent our effort. Talk to someone so that it should be on all the papers. Because the unfortunate thing is that in Africa, most of the papers or the media report only things within that country. We do not care about what is happening to our next door, even just our next door neighbor. So we have to make this thing viral. I have to make everybody to hear what is happening, because most of the things, especially the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, it is for the development of the whole continent. It is a pride of the continent. It is a pride of Africans. So we can do it, we should do it, and we should keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Prince Alifu, for that. Really, we indeed need that support. Ras Elijah.
Thank you, everybody, and distinguished guests and attendees. I am thinking on this most wonderful day of what His Majesty would do, and the importance of kindness and compassion and non-partiality, inclusivity. And, you know, I know that God is the only one that will make a way. That at the end of the day, we have to look concretely at the problems, and that problem is apartheid within the Constitution, a policy of ethnic federalism which encourages succession. The very nature of breaking away from that which is you to cut your hand off is insanity. That looking towards a unified Ethiopia, where the African Union can be called on to do more than it's ever done. Even with all of its problems, Ethiopia, knowing these different dynamics, can navigate and use the African Union in a positive way to make big changes when it comes down to global perceptions, and also for their own perception. And that the pressure needs to be there. But there also has to be extreme understanding of the difficulties of dealing, as Dr. Desta said, in a journalistic manner, where you're going to listen to both sides, even if one's lying, where you're going to be understanding that the Oromo have their own complaints and agreements that they've worked on for years in an ethnic federalist environment. And so there's a certain amount of sensitivity, like Dr. Desta said, this is a very large topic. And so the importance of being, understanding that Ethiopians must always see each other as their brothers and sisters, and at the same place challenge each other to be better human beings for the world, as Ethiopians can also be that pillar of light for the African Union, that they can navigate this, that this is an opportunity for the world to do the best they can, and African nations that are sympathetic likewise. But it means that we will have to adjust to differences and come up with new solutions, African solutions. And this is revolutionary. I've learned a lot today, and I want to say thank you to everybody for teaching me and for teaching so many. God bless you all. Tafari.
Oh, I do want to acknowledge the presence of Kwame Gonza from the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute. Would you like to say a word, Kwame Gonza? Would you like to share a word with us? Okay, maybe not there. So you're there?
Yes, he's here, but I don't know.
Okay, no, I see him, but I don't think he heard me. It's okay. I just wanted to give the opportunity. With that, I think we come to an end, but I would like to remind everyone as we close this session, that we say no more to false information. I'm taking some words from the Twitter campaign. No more, we say no more to false.
Sorry, he's rising hand.
Who? Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, Kwame Gonza. You can share some closing words. The floor is yours.
Please, if you accept him, like I was promoting him to a panelist, but he's supposed to accept my request. Yeah.
Okay, it's fine.
Thank you, Sister Malay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes, I just want to thank you for organizing this webinar. It is very, very timely. The messages that have been put out there by the panelists are very clear, and it is very timely. I would like to say once again that we should, be careful with the media that is putting out there the information. We should be able to filter out the message, and especially I encourage people, for example, to look out for African sources of information. Like, for example, if you want to know what is happening in East Africa or in Ethiopia, you need to look out for sources of information that sources of information that
Gonza, you are muted.
Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I was saying is that the sources of information which we engage need to be filtered very well for us to understand what is going on the African continent. Many times and historically, these sources of information from the Western media have been hostile to the continent. They have painted the continent in a certain way that is not friendly. And fortunately now, what we have is that information, sort of the sources of information have been liberalized, or let me say democratized. The space has been democratized with the emergence of social media. So we need to be able to look out for sources that are African in their orientation. Like right now, if I want to understand what is going on in Ethiopia, I will not go and ask CNN or BBC or France 24, because historically, these are colonial, media. We can't get all the African, information that is friendly to Africa from this type of media. So I will go to East Africa. We have a lot of, media houses in East Africa where you can get more accurate information, and even within Ethiopia itself. So this is what I would say, and I would encourage the other African people on the continent and those in the diaspora to look out for. It is very easy to be brainwashed by these Western sources of media. And also the other thing we have seen that these people, they don't have monopoly on knowledge and understanding that we, ever since the emergence of independence, we have seen that the Africans are capable of many things. Like one panelist spoke about the defeat of Italy by Ethiopia at the Battle of Adwa. So a lot of things have been done now by African scientists, politicians. We have had some good people and very good people and politicians, like people like Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere. So these people who are telling us what to do from the Western media, I think we have to outright reject their advice if it doesn't suit us as a people, as African people, if it doesn't take us forward as African people, and it does not develop us. We have to outright, reject it because it does not suit the African space and African development. So I want to applaud the stance that has been taken by the Prime Minister Abiy to say that this problem is an African problem. So all African problems should be attended to by the Africans, should be solved by the Africans, because we are more knowledgeable today than our forefathers were. We are more knowledgeable about the world we are living in. We understand the world now better. We know how nations are built. Nations are not built from the United Nations or the World Bank or the IMF. So we have to outright reject this because we are more knowledgeable now. We understand what is going on in the world. We understand the position, which the United States occupies when it comes to human rights. We know the history of the United States. We know the history of Europe. So these are not people who are in a position to come and lecture Africa or Africans on, on morality or human rights, because we Africans fought for our human rights and pushed these people out. They were violating our human rights and we pushed them out of the continent. So it is not the same people that should be coming to tell us about human rights, because we understand human rights more than they do, because we have fought for them before. So I would like to say that the Africans, we need to digest our information very well and filter it out, because most of it, even though the information space has been democratized, sort of, but still it can be abused by these people who have been holding information hostage. Today, information is not hostage. We just need to filter it out. I want to thank you very much for organizing the webinar. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I want to share one important question. I think he left the meeting now, but Ambassador David Komisyong, he said he placed the question, maybe it's overlooked in the chat, in the question and answer room, but I think it's important to pose that question. He is saying, I put a question in the in the question and answer asking why the government of Ethiopia has not contacted CARICOM, explained the situation in Ethiopia to CARICOM, and requested the solidarity and support of the Caribbean governments. He said, I put up that question to Wise. And he continues saying, it seems that we might be invisible, meaning he meant the Caribbean. We might be invisible to Ethiopian eyes. The reality is that the governments and people of the Caribbean know very little about the situation in Ethiopia. And what little we know would have been gleaned from Western media sources. So it has to begin with the Ethiopian government making the effort to reach out, to share information and analysis, and to request solidarity and support. I think this should be our homework, to bring this question to the Ethiopian government. Maybe I think Ambassador left, but yeah, we really have to bring it. This is really important. This is, yes.
Sorry, Ambassador Tafari actually answered his question, and I will read it. Just
okay.
Ethiopia, as a member of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States in Brussels, Belgium, is engaging the Caribbean countries through parliaments in member countries. That's what he responded to that question.
Thank you so much, Zelalem, for reading that. I didn't know that was posted, but I was going to say the same thing, that Ethiopia, with its hands full, is still making every single effort to reach out. So this is the point where we say, ask not what Ethiopia can do for you, but what can you do for Ethiopia?
Mama Desta, but it's a good one, but I think still we still have to do, we have a homework to do. We really have to rally behind our African diaspora, the Caribbean, and, come to that Pan-Africanism again. We have to revive it. I think I'm on that line. But yeah, so thank you again. Thank you, Defend Ethiopia and Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute for organizing, for adopting this idea, and for organizing this event. And thank you for believing in me. It's my first time to moderate, but I hope I did okay. And I really hope that as we leave this room, that we leave with the concept of no more interventions in Africa. For affairs of Africa, no more intervention by non-African states. And we go back, whether we have a media platform or an organization, and we share information with our people. And I think one simple thing from the strategy that we can take and implement right now is, as Prince Alifu said, maybe on our Twitter campaigns that we add these platforms who are willing to do it, and then they can campaign whatever information we are trying to correct out their false information, and they can join us. I see that as the first simple action, what we can do. And as I said in the beginning, we will prepare that joint statement together, Defend Ethiopia and the Kwame Nkrumah Institute, and then share it with you so that your organization can be a signatory. You will have your input. And also, I think Jeff Pearce volunteered to go through it once we prepare. We also add his pointers. One step at a time. Yes, for me, I made one step of answering that question: where are the African diasporas? That has been there during the Italo-Ethiopia invasion. So this is one step, and we can do more. So with that, thank you very much, I say, and yeah, good night to everyone, and thank you for being here.
Mahalet.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, Mr. Gnalen, if there's nothing, yeah, we can leave. Yeah. So good night.
Thank you. But I'm
Yeah, for our technical man behind this.
Registration
Thank you.
Thank you very much for our guests, and I think this session will continue for on another time also. I think so.
Yes, technical እስካለ ድረስ ምንም ችግር የለውም።
Yeah, Tashala, thank you. Yeah, Ras Elijah, thank you very much for being here. I'm sure the support of RAN will continue, and we